Alright, how's it going, y'all? Today I'm very excited because we are going over probably the most powerful monitoring solution, Zabbix. Zabbix is completely open source and is able to monitor pretty much everything and anything under the sun. It is phenomenal and really easy to use once you kind of get the understanding for it. And it is designed to scale to thousands upon thousands of servers and just be able to do pretty much anything you need. I've been implementing it for about 2 years now, and I finally got the hang of it, and it's been awesome. I get email notifications if one of my clients' VMs starts to get too full on space, or one of the startup utilities does not start on Windows. There are so many things it can monitor, and what makes it incredibly powerful are the templates. Pretty much, you can set up all these amazing complex finds without doing anything at all because there's already templates built for them. Another thing that makes it really great is it is really designed to go around firewall rules and be able to work however you need it to work. You can open up ports on either end and it will work, and you can also have proxies. And so it's just a really powerful solution. And one of the best things about it is it's open source. So even if you do choose to pay for support because you're a large organization and paying somebody support is absolutely worth that savings in engineers' time, you don't have to. So say one day that Zabbix decides to raise their rate something crazy. You're not locked in. It's open source. So you can just walk away and continue to use everything just without support. It is something that I really like, that model of open source but paid support that allows you to just kind of know, hey, they don't have complete and total control over me, which has happened with a lot of things where they go, we can start making a lot more money if we just charge people twice as much. And they're already locked in, so what are they going to do? No, you can get around all that stuff because you know you have a way out. All right, so first off, what is this video? This video is not going to be an installation guide. It is going to be instead me going over how to install on different clients. It's going to assume you've already stood up a Zabbix server or you just want to see the features of it. If you want, I will absolutely do a tutorial on how to install Zabbix on a server, but it's actually pretty easy. And this is really going to be going over the basics on how to get set up for either your home lab or your business for any of your monitoring needs, as well as some kind of lessons learned that I've gone throughout the years and kind of figured out with, because it's incredibly powerful, but you've got to kind of understand the workflow. Otherwise, you can end up burning a lot of time doing kind of useless things. All right, so now let's talk about what Zabbix is and what you should use it for, and really what I see the key benefits of Zabbix are. Zabbix is a monitoring solution. It is essentially an application that you can run that can monitor pretty much any computer. Any computer, server, IoT device, virtual machine, website, pretty much anything in that realm, it is designed to monitor. I will say one thing, I really would not recommend using it to monitor something like a laptop or a desktop, something that's coming on and off all the time, unless you've got some very specific rules and really need that kind of thing, because you'll do that and then all of a sudden all your data is going to be watered down because devices are going to be offline left and right, and that's not that big of a deal because it's a desktop. They're going to shut off at the end of the day or whatever. So that's the one thing I would not recommend monitoring it with it. But really anything that's designed to be up 24/7, it's great to monitor. All right, so now what is monitoring and what is it really useful for? So I really see 3 major things that Zabbix allows me to do that are huge. The first, and by far the most important, is problem detection. Automatic problem detection, that is. So because of an awesome feature of Zabbix that's really centralized a thing called templates, it is incredibly easy to set up monitoring and problem notification for pretty much any device. I'm going to talk about templates later on this video because it's a key part of Zabbix, but it makes it so that if you want to monitor a Synology and you want to get a notification if too many users have logged in at a single time, or if the main storage volume starts running out of space, that is able to be done incredibly quickly, all because of templates. The templates pretty much out of the box detect all the things on the server and set up monitoring on them. So if certain thresholds are met defined by the template, it can send you a text message, an email notification, just pop up a thing on the screen, so many different things, all very easily. So the number one reason I use it, and I use it a lot for clients, is I get email notifications if anything weird is happening. So if somebody starts running out of space on one of their virtual machines, I get an email there. Instead of them going, hey, what's going on here? I can just immediately go in, hey, I'm gonna fix this really quick before it's actually an issue, which is huge. And the next really nice thing are the graphs. So specifically for kind of event correlation and figuring out what happened after the fact. So say somebody says, hey, I tried to use the NAS yesterday and I just could not video edit off of it because it was lagging so slow. Or say they're like, hey, I tried to go to your website and it was taking a really long time for loading times to come in, or anything like that. Well, you just come in here and these are all pre-built by a lot of the templates, and I can just click on the graphs for my web server right here, and I can just look at everything under the sun with it. So let's look at the last 7 days. So I did a migration here, but let's look at the last 2 days and we can see all the different pieces in here. We can check out and figure out, okay, what was going on during this? Why was it slow? Different pieces that can really help you understand where the problem was. And so say you want to isolate this specific time, well, we can just zoom in there and boom, all of the graphs now are going to be focused on that. So this right here was when a backup was running. And so there's so much stuff in here that I can just tell what happened and what was going on. This right here is www.spacerex.co, hosted in AWS. And I'm monitoring all the data right here. And so that's really number 2, is just the ability to graph and really do post-event correlation and figuring out why something is not working great. Instead of spending hours looking at all these different pieces and having to do the physical machine, you can get a feel for what was going on just by looking at these graphs. And finally, number 3 is going to be customization. So Zabbix comes with a lot of stuff pre-built in, but it also leaves the door open for scripting. So if you need to monitor it and you can script it, you can add it to Zabbix almost across the board. And so that's one really nice thing about Zabbix that really brings it home, is the ability to customize it and bring all this stuff in customized for an exact setup. So those are really the big 3 things that Zabbix kind of sells itself on, and why I think a lot of people really enjoy it specifically. It's got a ton of other features. It's got maps, discovery, services, inventory. It's got a bunch of stuff in there that is very, very powerful. But those are the 3 things that I really think stand out and make it very valuable for people to implement. All right, so now let's talk about the really key components of Zabbix. Zabbix has the server. That's what you can run on a virtual machine, Docker, whatever. And that's where all the data ends up. And that's where it's got the nice web interface and everything like that. It's what's doing all the event detection, all of that kind of stuff. So that is the Zabbix server. So then how do you get the data? So that's where there's different options here. The most common being Zabbix Agent. So Zabbix Agent is a program that is run actually on the server itself that you want to monitor. Sorry, I said server there twice. On the virtual machine you want to monitor, on the device you want to monitor, whatever it is, the Zabbix Agent can run on that. And so that is where it's fully customized, and it can bring out pretty much anything under the sun, and you can make it do whatever. But a lot of things like a network switch or a Synology NAS don't really support just out of the box installing random software on there. And for stuff like that, you've got agentless monitoring. So the big thing that most people are going to be using is going to be SNMP polling, because that is pretty much the open standard that a lot of devices work with that are like, hey, if you need to monitor me, I have all these different SNMP parameters, and you can look at Synology's, there's tons and tons and tons of them. And so almost everything that is an appliance and really designed for more server grade stuff will be able to be monitored by SNMP. Most UPSs that have network cards on them have SNMP monitoring. And so all that stuff can really easily just come into Zabbix and have templates for that. Finally, other common agentless monitoring that I actually use all the time is web monitoring. So web monitoring is awesome. So I can just go into my spacerex.co web server, click on it. This is a super simple check. And it's just got, hey, this is the overall throughput of the website, and this is the response time when it's just going to a very simple page. I think this is loading the home page and just checking how fast it is. And so you can see I did a migration a few days ago right here to a new AWS instance, and the throughput went through the roof. It was insane how much faster this is. And the configuration of this also works where if the SSL certificate does not have a proper date or name on there for whatever reason, this fails and I get an email notification, which is huge because there's so many little things like that you don't want to set up and do, but instead it's just all done automatically. And so that's web monitoring. There's a bunch of other options you can see right here, a lot of stuff here, but really what I would say you're mostly going to be using is SNMP and web monitoring, or just having the Zabbix agent directly on there. Or if you're a really big smart home guy, you might be able to get MQTT running and set that up. But that's the whole thing. And so I'm going to do 2 demos towards the end of this video, going over how to use SNMP to monitor a Synology NAS. And I'm also going to go over how to actually use Zabbix Agent to monitor a web server installed in AWS. But as you can probably tell from this, if you've got something you need to monitor, you can monitor it with Zabbix. All right, and so now we're going to go on to the single most important thing you need to understand when using Zabbix, and that is templates. Templates are something that you really need to just dive into immediately, and that is all you should be using for the first very long time that you're using Zabbix until you really understand everything. Everything should be a template for you. You should always be using pre-built templates and maybe customizing them a little bit for your specific needs, and that is going to be your best experience using Zabbix. And so if we go into configuration templates, you can just search for pretty much anything under the sun in here, and there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of records pre-built out. And if you need to import them, you've got the ability to really import custom templates from the web. So there's a lot of people who have built templates, and the Zabbix forums are full of them. And so you can use those pre-built templates to easily just use those to monitor anything you need to monitor. And you'll also notice right here, I've got a few different custom ones built right here. And that's actually something I would really recommend doing when you start out. The way I've kind of set everything up is I take the standard template and then I link it to my own custom one. And so that way, anything I want to customize on my template, so say the Linux template monitors this every 5 seconds, and I only want to monitor it every 10 seconds. I can just go in and update my version of that template, and all my devices are going to update. And so I don't have to change the main template. I can keep that the same, but I've got my own custom one that everybody already uses. So I'm just going to open this guy up right here. And so templates have a few key parts up here, with the most important being items. Items are everything you're monitoring. So a template will start by having items right here, but they can also get added in via discovery rules that I'm going to talk about in a minute here. But items are anything you're monitoring. If you are checking the CPU temperature, that is an item. Anything that you are monitoring is an item, and that is kind of where all the data is stored. So right here you can see how everything works out, but this is not all the items that are actually going to end up in there. You'll notice there's nothing to do with anything with hard drives or anything like that. That's because those are actually added via discovery rules. So discovery rules are used to discover anything that is scalable, or just things that it doesn't know. They don't want to pre-populate all these lists that might not be there. So for example, an easy one to understand is disks. They have no clue how many disks you have when you start out. There's no reason that they should assume you have 55 disks in the NAS. So instead, they have discovery rules. And the way this works is there is a key. And so the Zabbix agent says, hey, Synology, how many disks do you have? That's this right here. Then for every single disk that is returned, it creates 4 different items, as you can see here, 4 different triggers, and a graph. And so let's look at the items it creates. It does the basic things. It adds the model number, the status, the temperature, and the type. So really basic things. And you can see they all have different times that they're updated. Obviously, you're not going to check if it's a SATA drive or SSD every hour. Instead, you just check once a day. And the same thing for the model. But you probably want to know the temperature a lot more often than that. And so that is why you've got different intervals as well as how long they are kept for. And so that is the other way you get items. You get items built off of discovery rules. And so that way, these templates are incredibly flexible. All somebody has to do is figure out how to get there, and then they can have everybody's devices scale to however many items they have in there, which is really useful. In some cases with ZFS, you can have thousands of disks, And so it just scales with however many disks you have. And so the next really important thing to see are triggers. And we'll just go up to the default triggers up here. And so once again, triggers can get added in the same way items are from discovery rules. And so triggers are what are used to tell you if there's a problem. And so every single trigger has its own severity associated with it. And so if it triggers and it creates a problem, this is going to be that. And they go from not classified, so nothing, I guess, at the bottom, all the way up to disaster. And they're color coded by that. And you can give warnings by that. So it's very powerful. And so you can see these are all the pre-built triggers. So for example, if your system partition goes critical, it's going to throw a disaster warning on there. And so these are all set up here to have different levels of warning and just really easily built out ways to understand it. The last thing are graphs. Graphs are pretty easy to understand. They essentially just take certain items and we'll graph them. And you can also have graph prototypes. And so when we look at my stack, I showed you all those different graphs of everything. That was based off of all of these different graphs. There's also dashboards that people can add in as well if you want to kind of centralize all of your stuff. So say you're monitoring a database and you want to put all the key database parameters on one dashboard instead of having them look at all the different graphs. You can also add a dashboard there. And then there are web scenarios, which is how you do web monitoring. But we're not going to talk about that in this case. All right, so that is the overview of templates, items, and just the general way things are set up. All right, so now let's figure out how to monitor a new device. And I'm going to pull up my DS923 Plus. So for this, we're going to be using SNMP because we don't want to just install Zabbix right on the Synology because it's not really supported, something weird might happen. Instead, Synology has this thing called SNMP that pretty much most appliances will have that are kind of designed for server spaces. And to do that, we just go into SNMP and we just enable SNMP service. So for the highest security, we will use SNMP v3 and we will just add in a username and password. We can just make this up. We'll call it Zabbix and say Zabbix is great. Really, these do not have to be super secure passwords, and note these are going to be available as plain text. And so that way we've got the ability to use SNMP. I would not use SNMP over the internet. If you do have a device you want to monitor via SNMP, I would recommend setting up a proxy on that network and then using that, just because SNMP is not really something you want just traveling over the internet. Even though it's got privacy, it's not really encrypted. And so I'm just going to set those two things up and hit apply. So now I've set that up and I'm ready to go. So let's go into our hosts and we will add in another host by hitting create host. Host name, this can be anything we want for this case specifically. We'll call it DS923. And visible name allows you to have it whatever. When you're using actually the Zabbix agent, this host has to match what is in the file. So that's why there's a visible name here as well. And once again, the most important piece, the template. We're just going to have it Synology and search. So I've got this Synology NAS mod. And then host groups. It's pretty much just however you want to be organized. Is it file servers? Yeah, file servers. And this is space recs because this is my own ones. And so you can just organize however you like there. For interface, this is where you've got the different options. So we're going to be using SNMP. And we can give it either a IP or a DNS name. We'll use the IP, which is 106. Our SNMP version, we did auth no privacy. And so for the security name, we said it was Zabbix. So we go back over here, it was Zabbix, and I believe I said Zabbix is great. So then we said for our auth no privacy, it is ZABX. And then you can disable or enable use bulk requests depending on how it works. I've disabled it for a lot of Synologies and I found it works better, but it's kind of test and check. All right, so now we should be added on in here. We go ahead and refresh it. So we can see right here, it did come in and this green means it is currently working. So we can go into latest data. We're not gonna see much here just because it's not run. And so you see everything's on its timers and everything, but that is where we've got everything. We're going to have a couple of graphs. They're not going to be that useful yet, but as time goes on, we will see more and more stuff in here. So sometimes I will kind of jumpstart it by going into configuration hosts and going down into DS923. And if you go to the discovery rules, you can click them on and hit execute now. So that way you don't have to wait for it automatically to run. And then the stuff will get preloaded in there much quicker, but it'll just automatically do it as time goes on. And so you can see without anything, just enabling that one setting, everything's been created and we've got all the stuff added on in there. It is very, very, very easy to add in, and we can see a ton of stuff already added in here. And there's a lot more we can actually check and figure out if we need to. These were all just pre-built, and I really do not have to do much of anything at all to get this working. And so that's how you can easily add a Synology in there. And we can also just see what problems are pre-built over here by going into the hosts and actually going into the triggers section. And so we can see that it's already set up all these different triggers for pretty much anything. It's monitoring all of our disk smart data. It has so much stuff that was already built out and set up for us that I didn't have to do it all. It's just all done automatically. Really, really, really great. And so with templates, you're just good to go. All right, and so now for the next one, we're just going to show how you install this on a Linux box or anything like that. This also works with Windows servers, but any servers you've got where you actually can install the agent on. And I'm going to show that this works over networks by really quickly just doing a demo on how to set this up on like an AWS instance. So I'm just going to SSH into a instance I've set up. And this is running on AWS Lightsail. So what we can do is we see that we are currently running Ubuntu 20.04 LTS. So that's actually my go-to of choice. So now we want to install Zabbix on there. So what I'm going to go in is I'm just going to go into the Zabbix, zabbix.com, and hit download. And they've got these great ones. So we want to do the Zabbix package because we're actually installing it using apt. I'm running Zabbix 6.2. You want to make sure this one's the same as what you're currently running. And Ubuntu. Just say which version it is. Say we want the agent or agent 2, depending on which one you want. And you literally just execute this code. So I'm just going to copy it in and we're going to run it. So that really quickly just went in and grabbed the package. Now we're going to use dpackage to actually enable it. So I'm going to run sudo. And now we're just going to run a sudo apt update. We are just following the instructions on here and they work great. And now we just need to do sudo apt install. So now Zabbix is installed. So now I just need to go in and change a couple of configurations. So I'm going to do sudo nano etc Zabbix, Zabbix agent d.config. And there's just a couple of pieces we need to change in here. So really all you need are a few pieces and they're what's called mandatory. So there's two different options. You can either do passive or active checks. So for passive, what you would do here is you would give the IP or the DNS name if you've got reverse DNS lookups, which is kind of complicated, but I did it on this. And this right here is where you've got the ability to choose what your server is. So this is the server or proxy's IP address that is actually coming in. So this is where the server reaches out to the actual device itself to run. So I'm actually going to go ahead and not use that at all. So I'm going to just leave that as 172.0.0.1 because instead I'm going to be using active. But if you wanted to, you could use passive. And now we go down to the active checks. So now we can say the server active. So I'm going to say zabbix.spacerex.co. And this is going to be the IP address of my house or wherever the Zabbix server is. We're going to add the port of 10051. So what this is doing is this is taking the virtual machine and it's going to be sending data out. So that way I can just put something in my port forwarding rules that say, hey, from the SpaceRex web server right here, allow this to go into my server. So this right here is just the IP address of your Zabbix box, wherever it is, and that's it. The last thing you always need to do is add in your host name. So I'm just going to call this demo, and this has to match whatever is in your table. So you just need to make sure that this matches whatever you put in there. And that's really all we need to add in here. There's a bunch of other stuff you can do, but that's really all you need. You need to either do active or passive. You can do both if you want to. And now we just need to set up the firewall rules. So I'm just going to actually set this to what my real one is. And so now I just wrote the file. And now we just need to execute the next two pieces, restart the Zabbix agent, and enable it on boot. So now I just need to update my firewall rule so that that incoming Zabbix agent packet can come into my network from that IP address. So I'm just going to do that now in the background, and then we're going to pop back in. All right, so now I've just allowed that into my firewall, and so we should be good to set up. So now all I need to go ahead and do is go in and add another host. All right, so now since I'm doing the active only one, I'm not going to get as much data, but it's great if you don't have really good firewall rules. So if you're running your main agent at home and your IP address may change often, this is great. So another thing you can do, if you really want to use the passive checks, which give you a little bit more granular information, and it runs a little bit faster in terms of, hey, as soon as you know it's down, but you don't have a static IP address where your server is like me, you can easily spin up a $3.50 AWS instance on AWS Lightsail and use that as a proxy, and that will have a static IP address. That's actually what I do, and so that way I get around that. But we're just going to be using the active version, and so we're going to add in the host name. This has to match what we put in there. And for our template, we are going to use Linux, and they've got one on here for template OS by agent active right here. And we do have to define an interface even though it's not really used. And now hit add. And now we're gonna have to wait up to 2 minutes before we get any data whatsoever. And so because we are using just active checks, you'll notice that right here, we are grayed out because it's unknown if we've got access to the agent. But if we look in here, right here, we can see our active checks are there. The screen available means we are getting data out of there, though it is just going to be a check-in and we're going to wait. So now our graphs should have started to load in. So we can go back into monitoring hosts and see it right here and dashboard. And we're going to see pretty much no information because not much has been populated. But we can see it right here. All that good stuff is starting to come in, and that's how you monitor it. There are a zillion more things to do, and it definitely needs its own tutorials. You've got the ability to add email notifications and so much more stuff, but I think this is where I'm going to cap it because this is really where the basics are and really where you can start to understand how to get everything set up and running. If you have any other questions, please put those down in the comments below and check out spacerex.forums.co because that's where I'm going to be answering all the really complex questions. Put an account over there. It's been a blast so far. And that way it's actually searchable rather than having it really annoying where I can have 12 replies to the same YouTube comment and nobody will ever see them ever again. All right, have a good one. Bye.